Sumas Lake was once a vast, shallow body of water located in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, stretching across what is now the Sumas Prairie, east of Abbotsford. Before it was drained in the 1920s, the lake played a vital role in the region's natural ecosystem and was central to the lives of the Indigenous people, particularly the Sumas First Nation. However, due to increasing pressure from settlers and the demand for agricultural land, the lake was ultimately drained, transforming the landscape permanently. Sumas Lake was a shallow, marshy body of water that varied in size throughout the year, influenced by seasonal changes and the water levels of nearby rivers. It was fed by the Vetter River, which originally flowed into it, as well as the Sumas and Chilliwack rivers before ultimately draining into the Fraser River. The lake was an essential habitat for fish, including salmon and sturgeon, as well as migratory birds, beavers, and other wildlife. The surrounding marshlands and forests provided rich hunting and fishing grounds for the Sumas First Nations, who had lived in the region for thousands of years. They relied on the lake for food, transportation, and cultural practices, constructing villages along its shores and using canoes to navigate its waters. In the 1860s, European settlers began moving into the Sumas Prairie, surrounding the lake to farm its rich agricultural land, and by 1871, most of the land was settled with small farms. The area surrounding the lake was some of the most fertile land in the region, ideal for growing crops and feeding livestock. But there was a problem. The lake served as a natural floodplain, absorbing excess water from the surrounding rivers. During freshet, or spring runoff, as well as heavy rainfall seasons, water levels could rise significantly, causing flooding around the lake. The ever-changing lake shoreline was highly problematic for European farmers in the late 1800s and early 1900s, who saw their crops frequently destroyed by the lack of predictability in the size of the water body from seasonal freshet. Due to pressure from the area settlers to correct the flooding after a particularly bad flood in 1876, the Sumas Diking Act was created in 1878. It was followed by the Sumas Draining and Diking Act of 1892 and the Drainage, Diking, and Irrigation Act of 1893, but Mother Nature had other plans. In 1894, the region suffered a catastrophic flood. The rapid melting of high snowpacks caused massive flooding along the Fraser River, stretching from Harrison to Richmond. Low-lying areas such as Annacis Island were entirely underwater. The record-high water levels caused the Fraser River to spill over its banks and flood Sumas Lake, causing it to expand to nearly 4 times its size, resulting in widespread damage to homes and crops. Residents called on the government to prevent further flooding from destroying their livelihoods. The solution? Drain the lake. While the idea of draining the lake was not new, with several failed proposals and attempts to do so, the flood of 1894 was the catalyst to push forward with this plan. However, it would be over a decade before any serious plan was considered. Besides the seasonal flooding, farmers made their case for draining the lake by pointing out that the flooding created a mosquito population nightmare. As the water receded, it would leave large pools of still water that became their breeding grounds. They were such a problem that it would force schools to close, keeping children indoors for up to 6 weeks. As well, farmers reported that unprotected young livestock died from the loss of blood. Not only would draining the lake prevent further damage to crops and eliminate the mosquito infestation, draining the lake would create 33,000 acres of fertile reclaimed land. While the lake itself was 10,000 acres, the surrounding floodplains, marshland, swamps, and seasonally waterlogged floodplains could be sold off for profit. With the BC Electric Railway looking to construct a line from New Westminster to Chilliwack, draining the lake would make construction of the line through the Sumas Prairie much easier. They brought an American hydraulic engineer, Francis LeBaron. LeBaron proposed redirecting the Vetter River through a canal north to prevent it from draining into the lake. He also proposed sectioning off the prairie into several areas using a network of dikes to prevent reflooding if a section of dike happened to breach. The cost of this plan, estimated at $1.55 million, was way more than the BCER was willing to pay, and instead decided to build the line along the southern shore of the lake at the base of Vetter Mountain. After another decade of more failed proposals, Fred Sinclair was given the job as chief engineer. His proposal was approved at the cost of $1.5 million, which was to be paid for by the sale of reclaimed lands. Similar to LeBaron's plan, Sinclair's included a series of dikes and a canal to redirect the Vetter River. Added were a dam and a pump along the Sumas River, and a drainage canal through the middle of the lake bed that would direct water to the pump house. In July 1923, the pumping began, and on June 26, 1924, the lake was gone. The drainage of Sumas Lake had a devastating impact on the Sumas First Nations. Their villages, which depended on the lake for food, resources, and transportation, were displaced. Despite their opposition to the project, their concerns were disregarded. As the lake receded, long-hidden evidence of ancient indigenous relics emerged. Artifacts such as arrowheads, stone tools, and fishing gear were uncovered, revealing a deep and enduring connection to the land. For thousands of years, the lake was vital to the Stolo First Nation, yet as the waters withdrew, so did a crucial source of sustenance, leaving behind remnants of a once thriving existence. The receding waters revealed numerous logs, stumps, and debris that had been carried down by the Vetter River and settled on the lake bottom. Stranded sturgeon were found wallowing in the mud, and settlers rushed in with their pitchforks to claim their share of the prized fish. Transforming the exposed lake bed into farmland required a massive effort. Ditches were dug along the perimeter and through the center of the fields to drain the Sumas floodplain. Water from these interconnected ditches was then pumped into the Vetter Canal, Sumas Canal, and Sumas River, eventually draining into the Fraser. With cost overruns on the drainage project doubling to $3 million, the government had to sell the land at $60 to $100 an acre to recover the costs. Land sales did not go as expected, and even after price reductions, the province contracted to build a 9x15 barn on each 40-acre plot and placed advertisements in newspapers worldwide to attract buyers. Many early purchasers were experienced farmers who believed they could make the reclaimed land productive through intensive farming practices and drainage techniques. However, the land proved difficult to farm, as it was silty, marshy, and the area remained prone to flooding. The unexpected growth of dense weeds soon choked much of the standing crops. Weed trees also sprouted rapidly in the fertile soil, and it took months of intense labor to clear the land for farming. The high costs of maintaining drainage systems, along with the vulnerability to rising water levels, made it difficult for many farmers to establish successful operations. Despite these struggles, over the time, the land became more productive as farmers invested in infrastructure and adapted to the challenging conditions. Sumas Prairie became a hub for a thriving dairy industry, supported by its high-quality grain, which sustained large herds of cattle. In addition to dairy farming, hop growers and tobacco farmers were among the region's major employers. In 1926, the Canadian Hop Growers Association acquired 600 acres of reclaimed lakebed, transforming Sumas Prairie into the largest hop-producing area in the British Commonwealth. This development marked a significant turning point for the region, as hops quickly became a key crop, strengthening the agricultural economy of the Fraser Valley. Alongside hops, tobacco also flourished, with farmers taking advantage of the fertile soil that had been gradually improved for cultivation. Today, 2 tobacco kilns still stand on the Sumas Prairie as lasting reminders of this once thriving industry. While the tobacco industry died off in the 60s, hops faced a period of decline, with the region experiencing a resurgence in cultivation in the 20th century, driven by the growth of the craft beer industry. Within just a few years, tens of thousands of acres were added to the Lower Mainland, becoming some of the most productive farmland in Canada. While the dikes and canals are generally sufficient for keeping the former lake bed dry for most of the year, the Barrowtown Pump Station, along with several smaller pump stations throughout the area, plays a crucial role during spring runoff and heavy rainfall. These pumps are essential for removing excess water from Sumas Prairie. Without them, the area is at significant risk of flooding. If the pumps were to fail during flood season, it's possible that the lake could return to its original state within just 2 days. Would this be enough to prevent another flood like the Great Flood of 1894 from happening again? In the spring of 1948, high snowpack, melted quickly during a heat wave in the latter half of May, caused rapid melting, overwhelming the Fraser River. While this flood didn't reach the same level as the 7.85 meters of 1894, it came close at 7.6 meters. The Mission Gauge has historically served as a primary reference for flood levels on the Fraser River. Its long-standing presence and strategic location in the geographic center of the Lower Fraser River system makes it a key tool for flood monitoring. The water level at this gauge triggers various response actions. When the level exceeds 6 meters, dike patrols begin, and at 7 meters, continuous response activities are initiated to manage the flood risk. During the Fraser River flood of 1948, water levels hit 7.6 meters and dikes along the Fraser River began to fail, causing massive flooding throughout the Fraser Valley. The flooding hit Sumas Prairie particularly hard. When the dikes failed, floodwaters naturally returned to their historic basin. Water depths reached up to 5 meters in some areas, particularly in the low-lying sections where the former lakebed was. Most of the prairie saw floodwaters between 1.5 to 3 meters deep. The flood was so severe that it recreated a temporary Sumas Lake, cutting off roads, submerging farms, and forcing thousands to evacuate. After the floodwaters receded, the provincial and federal governments invested heavily in expanding and reinforcing dikes along the Fraser River, particularly those in the Fraser Valley, where the devastation had been most severe. In the 50s and 60s, the Fraser Basin Flood Control Program led to the construction of over 600 kilometers of dikes, as well as pump stations and floodgates, all designed to better manage water levels and prevent future breaches. These measures proved highly effective, as the region experienced no major flooding for decades after the 1948 flood. However, their resilience was put to the test in 1972, when water levels surpassed the 7-meter mark, yet the dikes held firm, preventing catastrophic flooding. While we have largely succeeded in controlling the rivers of the Fraser Valley, another river just across the American border has proven far more unpredictable. The Nooksack River, which originates in the Cascade Mountains near Mount Baker, flows north towards Everson before turning west and ultimately draining into Bellingham Bay. In 1990, this river overflowed its banks, with its waters flooding over the border and into Sumas Prairie. The flood cut off Highway 1 and also inundated the towns of Everson and Sumas. While efforts were made to reinforce levees and dikes along the Nooksack River to prevent overtopping and breaches, in November 2021, the region was hit by a catastrophic storm that brought massive amounts of rain throughout British Columbia and Washington state. The storm brought record rainfall, with some areas receiving over 250 millimeters of rain in just 48 hours. The Nooksack River overflowed once again, sending floodwaters north into Sumas Prairie, effectively recreating the former Sumas Lake. The region's dikes were unable to hold the water back, leading to multiple breaches, while the Barrowtown pump station, which prevents flooding in the former lakebed, was nearly overwhelmed. Many farmers were unable to evacuate their livestock in time, resulting in the loss of an estimated 15,000 animals. In the aftermath, experts called for stronger flood control measures, including the construction of higher dikes, better drainage systems, and improved cross-border cooperation between Washington State and BC to manage the Nooksack River. Scientists at UBC, along with members of the Sumas First Nations and other research partners, suggest an alternative. Instead of investing an estimated $2.4 billion to rebuild the dikes and construct a new pump station, allocate the projected $1 billion to repurchase the land and restore Sumas Lake to its natural state.